This is still a lesson 1 of the medical diagnosis bot, part 2. We're going to look at now introducing some ifs and some functionality within our program. So we'll actually, from here, we'll open up the programs and we will make a copy by holding the X button of part 1, and we can make a copy of this program. And we're going to call this lesson 1 part. Oh, can't. So you're limited to amount of space and how much your project can be called. So we'll just go lesson 1 part 2 P2 part 2. Okay, so once that's been copied, we can move to that lesson we just created, which we call that one there. Let's go to it. So all it's done is taken up our lesson 1, and we're now going to use that information and continue to develop this medical bot. So the first thing we need to do, let's reference this as the main loop, main function, so as we don't lose it as we start to end of main function. As we start to add to the program, we can come back to our main function. And I might do that a little bit, and there we go. Great. All right. So in our loop, what do we want to happen? Well, firstly, we want to, well, let's do something for that. Let's make a print. Let's do print. Let's go welcome doctor. Let's go, what would you like to do today? Now if we go \n, it'll actually drop it down a line. Now what are we doing? We're going to go maybe make a menu. We'll say to list all patients, press 1, and then once again \n to drop another line down, and then to run a new diagnosis, press 2, and then once again at the N to make sure we drop another line down, and then to quit, press Q, and we'll close the quotations and close the brackets. So now we've done that, we could probably change this, the input, to say something like enter value. Great. Alright, so that's step 1. So it helps if you spell welcome correctly. And let's just make sure all our spelling is correct. Awesome. that's a good start. Okay, so if I run that, what do I get? Oh, okay, so it's dropped to enter value. So if I enter 1, it finishes. So F5 to come back. So really what we're looking to do is maybe have a wait time. So let's have a look. So we'll come down to here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn about a function. So what I want to do down here, I want to make a function. Now a function, all it does is allows us to call a name of a piece of code rather than sequentially from one spot to the next. We can actually put some data in this function, and then we could then ask at any time to call that information. So what we want to do is we want a function called wait, and then we've got to close the brackets. Okay, so that's a new function. Make sure all functions need to have a return. So in this case, we're going to return a void, which means it's going to return nothing. Okay, so what we need to know is how long we're going to wait. Now we're just going to give this a variable inside or an argument inside the function. So let's say number. Okay. So let's see, if we go to F1 and we look for command references maybe. There we go, time and date. And if I go to time, okay, so look, well, there we go. Here's an actual function called wait. So we'll just use that information. So let's grab that information. So we're going to go number now equals time. So time's another function which gets called. End is equal to time plus the interval, or in our case number. And then we're going to talk about a while loop. Now a while loop will continue to run unless some criteria is met. In this case, if we have a look at that, it says if the end, which is effectively the time plus the amount of time we've asked for to wait, is greater than now, which is the time, then we're going to end the loop. Okay, so let's add this command in. So we'll come back to F1. So inside the function, I like to put a little tab in there, but let's do that. Let's go now. So that's a variable. So we could probably put var for variable, like we did last time. So var request equals input. So that's another variable. Okay, so and it's going to equal to time. Now time is a function in itself, and we're just going to say is equal to now. So the variable now equals time. We're going to have another variable that says end equals now plus our number. Okay, and then we're going to say while end is greater than now, we're going to keep looping. Okay, and inside that loop, we're going to update the information, and we're going to now equals time. And we need to now close the repeat or the while loop. And I think that looks pretty good. So now we just have to call that function. So to call that function, we just start it by saying wait and how many seconds we want to wait. In this case, it'll be 5 seconds. And there you go. We can see the menu when we run the program.
And after the 5 seconds, it'll ask us to enter a value and finish. So F5, we'll come back to the menu, to the program. So now we've actually got a function that does the await command, and we can call this anytime we want to. So next, let's do some work inside the main function. I might get rid of these clear function and update function. So what do we want to do inside the main function loop? So first thing we want to do is after we get the request or input request, we want to compare it to a number, I suppose. So we're going to put an if statement here, and it says if the input is equal to 1, then do something. So I'll just use a comment here for the moment, just to allow me to continue to include all my if statements. And we always finish off with an end if on an if statement. So the three criteria are if, then, and end if. And you can see that the actual if commands are working correctly because they'll be in red. Any commands that the system knows will be in red. So secondly, we want to know that if the doctor or yourself it puts a 2 into the input, then what do we want? Well, I guess we want something to happen then. So maybe as a comment, we'll just put run diagnostic, and we'll end that if. And then finally, if the request is equal to Q, then we want to quit the program. And finish off the end if. So this will continuously run because it's inside the main loop repeat. So we will try and run this with an F5 and see what happens. All right, the main menu comes up for 5 seconds. And if we press 1 and enter, oh, something happened there. Okay, well, nothing will happen because we've only got a comment inside an if statement. So let's put something inside the if statement that will happen after the request is equal to 1. So let's put a print in here. So here's one of the main things to remember is that every second inside a loop, the program repeats at least 60 times. So you can quite easily fill up your memory of your computer, or in this case, your switch, fairly quickly. So we're going to run it again, holds for 5 seconds on the menu, and we'll press 1 and enter, and we get an error out of memory. So what happened is that the print list all patients actually filled up all the memory because it continued to print over and over again. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to pull that print out, and we might create a separate function that happens when we hit the request equals 1, 2, or Q, or for quit. So we're going to give it the new function a good name. So in this case, we'll call it a list of patients, or list underscore patients. And we'll come under after the loop, and we will make the function list patients. It must be the same name, and it must be the same spelling. And what do we want to happen when we press 1 and it calls the list patients? We're going to clear the screen. Then let's print that same thing, list patients. Finally, we must make sure that and we might wait a few seconds. So we'll call the function wait. And then all functions must have a return. In this case, we're not returning anything, so it'll return void. So we'll run that. Okay, we get our main menu. And we enter 1. And we get the printout. Waiting 3 seconds, and it should finish. Okay, so let's do the next function. So if request equals 2, we want something to happen. So make sure we give the function a good name. And let's create the function. So function start underscore new underscore diagnosis. And similarly, in the list patients function, we want to clear the screen. We then want to print the start diagnosis. We want to wait a few seconds. And we must return something in a function. In this case, void, which is nothing. All right, let's try that. So if I press 2 and enter, I get start diagnosis, which is what I expect. If I press 1, I get list of patients and diagnosis, which is correct. Great, let's finalize the last of the if requests, if inputs, request inputs. So Q will be quitting the program. So we'll call that function something like quit. Nice and simple. And we'll come down and we'll create the function. Make sure it's the same name. Okay, once again, clear the screen. We want to print quit. Great, we'll wait a couple of seconds. And we must return void on every function, or at least return something. In this case, because we're not, oh, actually, before we go there, if we hit break, it'll actually stop the program. So break is a command to actually finalize the program up. And a call always return. In this case, we're not returning anything, so we're just going to return void. Great, let's try this. Menu comes up. I press Q, quitting program, and it's done. All right, awesome. So let's go back up into our main function loop. What happens if we wanted, what happens if someone actually, like the doctor or yourself, decides to press other than 1, 2, or Q? So we want to test that so as we can actually say, hey, you pressed the wrong thing, and we'll give you the menu again to have a look what you can press, and go from there. So we want an if statement that says the input is, if the input is not equal to 1 or is not equal to 2 or is not equal to Q, then do something. So in this case, the not is equal to is an exclamation mark, equals. That's what they call a not equals. And we can do that a few times. We can actually like link if statements together. So the all links these three together and says, hey, look at the three, look to see if any of these are correct. If they're not, well, it doesn't meet the requirements. And what are we going to do? We're just going to clear the screen. Now, we want to print the main menu again, but the main menu sits outside this loop. So the only way for the main menu to come back up again is to have that print statement with inside this if statement. So we're just going to add it back in. But we also want them, after the main menu comes up, to put in a new number for the request. So we also need the request in there because the request input is outside the loop. So we're going to gather that too. So we probably need to put that in as well. So we'll, oh, in this case, we're going to wait a few seconds, which is we need to do because otherwise it will just flash back into the input. And we'll make the request again. Now we don't have to make this a var because it already is a variable. It's a global variable that sits outside the loop. So therefore it's already exists in the system. So all we're doing is we're asking to say, hey, I want you to put another input in because you didn't put 1, 2 or Q. All right, let's try that and see what happens. All right, whoop, got an error. Okay, so line 26, let's have a look. Line 26, does anyone see what the error is? So if we look at 26 is clear, well, that's not an error, but it's always worth looking one line above because sometimes the one line above is actually making the error and it's just saying that it's going to break the line below. And of course, it's the then, because remember all ifs must have an if, then, and end if. And now if we run it, we should be all right. Okay, we get our main menu. And let's put a number that isn't in the list. Okay, and we get back to the main menu, and the enter value comes back. And if we put 1 in, we should get list of patients and diagnosis. So it runs that function, that's correct, brings up the main menu, and then goes back to enter the value, which is perfect. So let's try a number that's not. Yep, that's right, straight to the main menu. Yep, okay, and 2, yep, start diagnosis. So all that looks really great. So all that seems to be working fantastically. So the final one will be Q, quitting program, finishes. Awesome. So that's looking really great. So that finishes up this lesson. We talked about the if statements. We looked at some functions and how standard functions work. We looked at arguments inside functions. And next lesson, we'll continue to add to this program and see how we go. Thanks.